And as we mentioned, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy has returned to the nation's capital.
He's pressing for more support for the war in his country as some House Republicans push back against new aid for Ukraine. President Zelenskyy met privately with lawmakers on Capitol Hill this morning. He's also going to be sitting down with President Biden in the Oval Office for the second time since the start of the Russian invasion.
His visit comes as Washington moves toward a possible government shutdown. House members are expected to vote on advancing a new defense spending bill today, as well as a vote on a new short-term funding bill Saturday. Earlier, Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer pressed for further aid for Ukraine.
My message to President Zelenskyy and to my colleagues was simple. America must always stand with our friends around the world, and that includes the people of Ukraine. It's very clear that if we were to have a government shutdown or pass a CR without Ukrainian aid, the damage that would occur on Ukraine's campaign would be devastating. In fact, to quote President Zelenskyy in the room, and this is a quote, he said, "If we don't get the aid, we will lose the war."
CBS News congressional correspondent Scott MacFarlane and senior White House correspondent Weijia Jiang join us now. Hey there, Scott. There are some GOP members that are balking at giving Ukraine more money. How widespread is this sentiment among Republicans?
It's growing. There are a number of Republicans who say they will withhold their votes for any aid for Ukraine, and the number gets larger by the day. And what struck me so much being at the Capitol for this visit from Volodymyr Zelenskyy was how small it felt compared to his prior visit last year. They didn't have a joint session of Congress. They didn't have a big auditorium with members wearing the yellow and blue lapel pins or carrying flags. It happened in small meeting rooms. It felt utilitarian. And coming out of the visit, we heard from Republicans who say they're just not going to continue writing checks to Ukraine, expressing any number of concerns that so much money has been spent already, that there's concern of waste, fraud, and abuse of the money, not enough oversight, and that there doesn't seem to be any articulated end game or manageable path towards ending all this. And this is really a fundamental problem, and it's why Volodymyr Zelenskyy was here today. He needs the support from the U.S. government, and Congress has to be the one to fund it. And right now, it's not only a problem in Congress to get funding for Ukraine, it's one of the things holding up spending money on anything in Congress. We're facing a government shutdown in 10 days, and aid to Ukraine is one reason why.
Right. Weijia, President Biden is seeking an additional $24 billion concretely in aid for Ukraine. How important is the U.S.'s support for Ukraine's war effort and its relationship with our relationship with that nation?
Well, President Zelenskyy has made clear that it is everything. I mean, frankly, the U.S. has already supplied $113 billion in humanitarian and military aid. And so imagine if that money or even a portion of that money were not there. Zelenskyy claims that they would lose the war. And what that means, according to him, is that he warns that we could enter World War III as a matter of geography, because you look at Ukraine, you look at what it's surrounded by, all NATO countries, and Zelenskyy said during his address to the UN that if Russia wins, it's only a matter of time before it goes after other territories. And of course, if it attacks one country in NATO, then the defense means that all of the countries will respond, including the U.S. And so that is the argument he's trying to make, that this is not just about Ukraine, that it's actually about stability for the entire world. And the president has said as much. He also says that this is about American influence and standing, that other countries have to be able to trust the U.S., not to turn their backs in a situation like this, and that the U.S. will always stand up for democracy. But as Scott pointed out, it's not up to the president to pass those funds. It really is up to these lawmakers who are growing more hesitant. And so the question is whether they will approve a smaller package. But we can report that a U.S. official tells CBS News that the president will be announcing some sort of assistance package to Ukraine today. The question is what is in that, and if Zelenskyy thinks that's enough.
And Scott, it appears more progress has been made on the fight to avert a government shutdown. What impact could President Zelensky's visit have, if any, today?
It only seems to have complicated matters. This afternoon began with another ominous sign toward a shutdown. The U.S. House brought, as the afternoon began, what is typically a very simple vote to the floor, something that usually passes overwhelmingly, a procedural vote to begin debate on funding the military. In every district in America, there's a popular military employer or base that they want to have funded. And the bill just failed. Republicans trying to do this with only Republican votes, which means the margin is narrow, but they couldn't even secure their own Republican votes for the easiest of the government spending bills. And one of the people who voted against it, Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene of Georgia, said the reason she voted against it was because there seems to be aid or support for Ukraine in the bill. This is the easy stuff. This is first grade math for Congress. They've got to deal with algebra and calculus down the road when they try to pass a continuing resolution or broader spending bills. If they can't pass the first grade math, I'm not sure they're going to be able to get through the college courses come September 30th. And the Ukraine issue seems to be what's stripping Republicans of their ability to do their business as a party in the U.S. House, much less deal with the Democrats in the Senate and the White House.
So, Weijia, what does this mean is a likely result happening, or most likely result following today's visit? Will more aid likely be given to Ukraine? What does the White House expect?
Well, the White House says that there will be a security assistance package that will help Ukraine both in the short term and the long term. One, to fend off the constant assaults from Russia, but two, to prepare for what the White House calls a long winter ahead and dealing with things like electricity and the infrastructure there for Ukrainians to get through that brutal cold winter. But again, this question of enough funding is very different from having some security package for Ukraine, because Zelensky has said he is not trying to sustain the war. He wants to win the war, to beat Russia. And to do that is a very different package required than just to make it through this next season. And so a lot is up for discussion. The president will make yet another plea, which he did in front of world leaders at the UN. But in many cases, guys, his crowd is tougher today because so many have already made up their mind about purse strings and about the fact that they won't be opening them anymore.
Yeah, that timing certainly difficult for him. All right, Scott MacFarlane, Weijia Jiang, thank you both.
Sure.
And a reminder, we are going to bring you live coverage of Ukrainian President Zelensky's visit to the White House at 3 p.m. Eastern, right here on CBS News.